Hey guys, welcome back to yet another video grading the 2021 NFL Draft Class. If this is your first one, just a little disclaimer that we are not professionals. We did not spend every second of the past few months looking at game film and watching each and every one of these players, so there may be some inaccuracies, but overall, we did a pretty good job with this, I think. We're going to be going through the NFC North here, starting with the Packers. My Twitter is FTP Anderson.
And your name is Gabe, and my name is Elijah, and my Twitter is FTP Jaw, Jah.
So go follow those
Now,
up. We'll be sharing our thoughts on NFL news and such there. Also follow the main
and
Twitter.
if you have hate mail, just send it to only his Twitter.
For sure, man.
I
I
don't
could
want
take
to.
it. Also follow the main franchise tag Twitter. It's at tagged franchise. If that's wrong, you'll see text on the screen right now telling me I'm wrong. Um, but yeah, let's get into it. Start with the Packers.
The Packers are fun. It's they're not. They drafted a terrible corner. Well, unless you want to take this away.
I mean, hey, hop off my man Eric Stokes. To be fair, all right. So it was at the end of the first round. It was pick 29. They took an athletic corner. He's big, he's tall, you know. Um, but man, if the Packers aren't great at drafting defenders in the first round when their offense is struggling, he was cornerback 3 through the first 2 weeks of the season. He started in week 3. He got an interception in week 4, and in his rookie season, he did defend 14 passes, but his sophomore season, he kind of fell off a cliff a little bit. He only started in 9 games, only 26 total tackles, and then had a season-ending ankle injury.
And I don't actually, despite the bias I certainly have, I don't actually hate Eric Stokes, but he's gotten to that rookie year. He did play pretty well against us, kind of like, I wouldn't say top end wide receivers of the league, but like the good wide receivers of the league. Um, Tyler Lockett and Terry McLaurin. I think he didn't like lock them down, but he held them pretty good when I was looking at some film for him. Um, he's year two was a step back, and then you have the injury, so it's just harder to value all of it when you only have half the snaps as he did the year prior. But overall, his catch percentage and the yards and all of that, I gave him a B minus because I'm not gonna give him like a flat C, but I'm also he got injured and he missed time, so I'm not gonna like hold the second year against him too hard. But we'll see how you think.
So I was a little bit harsher with him. I went C minus. Looking back at like my notes on him, I'm not entirely sure why I went that low, but I think my main reasoning was that Asante Samuel Jr. was still on the board. If you're going to take a corner and there's this many corners that are relatives of former NFL players and they are high profile, not like, Thaddeus Moss. Like if there's these high profile sons of athletes that have been playing football their entire lives, chances are they're going to turn out pretty well. And all three did with J.C. Horn, Pat Surtain, and Asante Samuel Jr., all turning out pretty well in the first 2 seasons. So if you're looking for a corner, there's a better one on the board. And the other reason I don't like the pick is because they have so many other holes on their team. Rodgers needed receivers. I mean, Devontae's great, but who's their second option? They brought back Randall Cobb, like Alan Lazard is
Yeah,
okay, but he's not a great second option. So I don't really
yeah,
like the pick for those reasons, not necessarily because Eric Stokes is a bad corner or anything.
yeah. I think now that you've said that, and just kind of like okay, looking at him as opposed to the other corners that were on the board, and you got a corner, yeah, but where were the other holes? I see all that argument. Uh, and then also looking at it, I was like, B minus might be too high. So I'll go down to a C, but I feel like C minus is a bit harsh considering the late first round nature of the pick.
That's fair, and he hasn't been that terrible. I'll see you with a C, and I'll agree. The other thing earlier, you had mentioned the receivers he was locking up, or he was not locking up, but playing against. He is the
Yes.
CB2. Obviously, he always will be to Jair Alexander. So if it's man to man, and they've got like Jair wants somebody, he's gonna take them. So Stokes is kind of left with the second option, and with Jair being a physical
Mhm.
corner, obviously he was taking on Lockett because Jair wanted DK because physical and
DK,
physical,
yeah.
right? So Stokes will just be stuck with whoever Jair doesn't want to cover or whoever the second best option is. So he probably won't have that many showings against wide receiver ones until he's either not on the Packers or Jair isn't on the Packers. Um, but I do like I like a C for him. I don't
Or
think it
some
was the right
schematic change
pick.
happens to the defense. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he was necessarily a bad player, just definitely not the right pick. And with that in mind, let's move on to the next not the right pick with Josh Myers in the second round, pick 62. One, just one,
Uh,
one single pick
we're both gonna
later,
do it.
one pick later, Creed Humphrey, All Pro center. This
Yeah.
pick, very mediocre center. You know, not terrible. Definitely not the worst player on the board. Like,
He had some injury. He had like I don't know if it was all injury in terms of his usage for his rookie year, but he didn't play many rookie years, and he didn't like allow that many sacks in year two. But he's also center, so you'd hope he doesn't. And Aaron Rodgers is also behind him, so it's like what's the likelihood of Aaron Rodgers getting sacked as opposed to scrambling and throwing the ball away or just doing something crazy? Um, Literally, Creed Humphrey is like the biggest um L to be drafted like right behind him. It hurts his pick so much.
so we were talking about in the last video, Nick Bolton and Pete Werner, how they were picked a couple picks apart, but both solid linebackers where you're not like, ah, I missed out on him, or like whatever, right? The better player wasn't picked first or second. They're just both solid linebackers. Not the case with Josh Myers and Creed Humphrey, where Josh Myers is a mediocre at best center, and Creed Humphrey is on a lot of people's number one, like in that number one position for that center position.
People were thinking there was like minor buzz his rookie year that he might win Offensive Rookie of the Year as a center. Like that's just a little bit of buzz able to generate that is like just an immense thought of a center doing that. It's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Um,
No.
I had a D minus on Myers. I think without Creed being drafted one pick later, I probably would have had like a C minus, but that much of like, man, just a straight whiff is crazy.
Yeah, I have a C minus because I didn't really weigh the fact of Creed. I more so was like, okay, he got injured, he didn't play great, so C would be if you're like average and you do good and you're drafted at a good spot. But yeah, with the draft of Creed right after, and then that's like the biggest knock you can put on the Packers for the selection. Not even on Josh, like not on Josh Myers at all. It's just the Packers organization made this pick when Creed Humphrey was right there. And so I'll agree with you. I will move that down a full letter grade down to D minus because of that like oversight on the all pro talent.
These first three picks are just crazy with the same exact theme. Because next we're going to Amari Rodgers at 85, who, if you remember from the last video, I said that I liked coming out of college. I again watch one or two bowl games a year, and then I watch the combine. And so I pick like one or two players, and I'm like, ah, that's the one. They've all been whiffs, every one of them. And Amari Rodgers was one of those where I saw him in a bowl game or like a bigger, higher profile college game, and I was like, oh, he's a solid player. Um, One big knock I have that'll be just about the same as Josh Myers, they had Equanimous St. Brown on
Same
their
guy.
roster,
Yeah, yeah.
and his blood
On the
biological
board.
brother, Amon
Oh
Ross St.
man.
Brown, was on the board, and they decided to go with Amari Rodgers. And the stark difference between the two players is crazy.
And if you want to ignore like the whole, oh well, you're just playing semantics, but they don't know what's gonna. This is hindsight. He's not on their team, so clearly they made the wrong pick. If you can't hold on to your third round pick after 2 years, you cut him. Like he's not traded away with a pick to get something else. No, he was straight up just cut. He didn't ever really see the field. He was just a return man. And a third round wide receiver when you have Amon-Ra St. Brown on the board, yikes.
So
Um,
Amon Ra was a rather low profile guy in like coming out of college. He wasn't like ever talked up to be like a first like day
mhm.
one or day two pick, but I mean, you've got his brother on your roster. Like, at least look at him. The other thing about Amari Rodgers, he fumbled on punt returns 7 times before they finally took him off punt return duty. My bad. They didn't take him off punt return duty. They straight up cut him after those 7 fumbles. He signed with the Texans. He was better there, but he only had 154 yards receiving in that Texans receiver room that had nobody. So not just a knock on the Packers for not taking Amon-Ra. Obviously, there's a huge knock on that, but man, Amari Rodgers is just a straight whiff. I have him as a pretty easy F. I don't think I'll go any
Yeah.
higher than that.
He had 95 yards for the Packers, and soon as he's like offensively, not return yards, but as soon as he leaves the Packers, he goes ahead and has 154 in just 6 games. And so even though he's cut, I mean, he he outperforms with Davis Mills than he did with Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Like it's just not a good pick. He was not a good fit for them, and that should.
You good with an
I
F on
also
him then?
went F.
Yeah.
I went F.
Okay.
Yep.
Uh, Next up, round four, pick 142. Royce Newman, offensive lineman. I went with a D on him. He had a worse PFF grade than Myers, and he started in 16 games his rookie year. He's not been a difference maker on the Packers' bad offensive line. And when you've got a bad offensive line, you know, there's always going to be opportunity to start. It doesn't mean you're going to be good.
Yeah, he started like all but one game, and it was the last game of the year as a rookie, and that was like he allowed 32 pressures on those snaps. He wasn't good. Um, he just ended up being a backup in year two, and even though he's a fourth rounder, and I gave him a little more slack than I did Myers because of that, he's kind of just not found a consistent uh, performance level yet, and I gave it a C minus. Interesting on if you want to go up or down here.
I will pull up his thing real quick.
You were a D minus or a
I was a
D?
D, just a D flat.
Okay, so
Uh,
I would say D plus
I'll go,
is.
yeah, I was
I'll
gonna
go down to
say,
D plus.
okay. So we're going D plus. The PFF grade on him is what I just pulled up. He wasn't awful in 2022. We've seen lower. He had a 57.5, which again, not great, not awful. He had a similar grade year
Oh,
one. So um, we've seen way worse though. So I'll go with a D plus on him.
sounds good. I'll start us off with the next one in round five, pick 173. We had Tadaro Slayton. Um, I'll rip the bandit off. I gave him a C plus just because he's in the fifth. He has his little role of okay, rotational D lineman. He wasn't like early as a as a D tackle, and he doesn't have a bigger role for the team that's like expected of him next season or anything. Like he also just has been like terrible. So
I
I give it C plus benefit of the doubt. I could
I
go lower.
I also had a straight C plus on him, where I said basically the exact same thing, where he's not a huge impact player, but he got snaps in all 17 games, both of his first two seasons. So he hasn't missed time to injury. He hasn't missed time to moving down the depth chart. And that's on a team with Kenny Clark in the middle. And you've obviously got your, certified dog
Mm-hmm.
nose tackle in Kenny Clark. So he's not going to be competing for the DT1 role, but
Yeah.
he plays on roughly 30% of snaps. He's got a sack. He's got over 50 tackles. Not crazy
Yeah, he's a
impressive,
good
but he's a fifth
rotational
rounder.
guy in the fifth rounder. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I'm glad we agreed right off the bat for that because I think the value is there for him on the team.
Yeah, you said C plus, and I was just like, oh man, crazy. Um, but yeah, so we're good. C plus on him. Moving on, 5 picks later in the fifth round, we've got Shamar Jean Charles. I had a D on him. He's only played 40 snaps. He has 11 total tackles and a 100% completion percentage allowed when targeted. Um, I went ahead and did the same thing that I did with basically every other player who stayed with the team that drafted him, and I bumped them up from an F to a D. Uh, and he did have recorded stats, so he wasn't just a straight up practice squatter the whole time.
Yeah, he had stats. He got special teams reps along with his very few and far between defensive snaps. I also just went flat D with that.
Cool. And then we've got another triple named man. We've got Cole Van Lannon at 214 in the sixth round. Um, Practice squad until week 15, single snap played for the Packers before he was traded for a seventh round pick. I went F. I'm thinking of actually creating a new grade and calling it an F plus because he became a seventh round pick. Um, the only reason
uh,
like not like totally serious about that is because it was a sixth round pick and he turned a sixth round pick one year into a seventh round pick the next year. So it's not exactly the best trade-off, and with only one snap
See,
played.
I had about the same feelings. I went D minus, and I was like, this is an F, but it's he got a seventh, and that just slightly lessens the blow of how he's not on the team anymore.
All right,
I will go F plus.
all right. New
I
grade
think we can
created,
lock in
F
F plus
plus.
because D
Cool.
minus feels too high. Yeah,
Yeah.
first of its kind.
All right. Yep. Um, actually, if you watched the first video, Ian Book, he got an F minus. So we're doing
Yeah,
this all
so
all
we're
around.
already in the ionic charges of Fs already. So we've
All
got
right.
the F plus here.
And then 6 picks later at 220, they took Isaiah McDuffie, special teamer, still with the team. I need to change my grade because it was a C, and I've been doing a D for those, so I'm moving down to a D.
Oh, how rude. I also had a C, just because he's a sixth rounder and he actually has a roster spot.
Fair enough.
I
All right,
guess
C.
I'll match you, but we'll go D plus.
Okay, so we'll
There's
kind of match our other
there's what
grades that
a
we've done,
foot down. Yeah.
and then further on into the 7th round, we got Kylan Hill, running back. Again, more of a special teamer than an actual running back. He only had 1 carry last season. Uh, the only benefit of the doubt that I gave him is that he's a 7th rounder on a team with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. And with two really good running backs, you're not going to see much playing time. So for him, again, to still have a roster spot, I'll match the last grade and go D plus because I matched the grade and had a C on him.
I will do that. Yeah. I can I can drop that to D plus. So I was at C minus. All right, moving forward, we got the final grade, the full team grade. Now, I feel like all I've done today is lower my grades, so I anticipate my final grade needing adjustment here. They missed early, but like kind of hard, um, with Myers and Rogers and Newman, and the only real plus we got is that, oh, they're on the roster. The later guys, it's like, hey, they're on the roster still. And when that's the positives you're taking out of it, it ain't good. Um, I originally had a C. I think C minus or D plus is now applicable after the changing grades.
So I actually originally had a D, and I have lowered grades as well. The only good pick was a C plus, so I feel like leaving it at anything above like a D is kind
Above,
of weird
yeah,
because the C plus is only a C plus because he was taken in the 5th round. Again, we had the only picks that got good grades are because they were taken late, and those good grades are C's. Um, and the other thing that just leaves a bad taste in the mouth of the Packers is the first 3 picks all had better players at those positions that they could have reasonably taken that were taken within a round. And the only one that was an actual like full round later was Amari Rogers to Amon-Ra St.
Amon Ra.
Brown.
Yeah. I think I think the plus. I don't see because you lowered my opinion on Eric, and that was like by full letter grade. So now that I'm thinking like, okay, it was a C before. I think full letter grade dropped down to straight D after he dropped and everyone else dropped. Good spot for them, or bad spot for them. Terrible.
Oh, terrible, terrible spot. All right.
Good decision on us to grade that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, overall Packers final grade of a D. Moving onward in the NFC North, I can remove the hat.
I can put on the correct the rightful heirs to the division. Sorry, just had to straighten that out real quick.
Yeah, we're moving to the Lions if y'all couldn't tell. In the 1st round at pick 7, the Lions got Penei Sewell. They needed a stud offensive tackle. They got a stud offensive tackle. Going into the draft, there was a lot of hype about him going to either the Bengals at 5, who really needed O-line help for Joe Burrow, or the Dolphins at 6, who really needed O-line help for Tua. Both of them passed and decided to take receivers. Uh, can't say that it's panned out poorly because those receivers are both studs, but the Lions just had a all-time pick fall into their laps at 7.
If any of them fell to us and Sewell was still on the board, I think they like Sewell enough where they probably would have still taken Sewell. Um, I obviously really like Penei Sewell. Um, he's great. He's like probably one of the top ranked PFF tackles. Um,
Excuse me.
and I'm not a whole big fan of PFF, but they got something right there. He's been an absolute stud. I mean, he's gotten 100% of snaps 2 years in a row. He's gotten a Pro Bowl. He's fantastic. I gave him an A plus. That might be too much. I can reel it down to an A, but holy hell, do I love him!
No, I put
He
an A
didn't
plus on
fucking
him.
catch for a first down. So
Yeah, I put an A plus on him as well. I think that if you are generational, you are deserving of the A plus tag, and Panay is definitely a generational offensive tackle. He's the I feel like we've seen a lot of offensive tackles go early, and he's the only one in my memory that didn't have any real knocks on him in his rookie season, where like a lot of them kind of came in and were, learning the system or learning the speed of the NFL rather than college. But I feel like I never heard any of that with Panay. I feel like he made the transition essentially seamlessly.
yeah, he really did just like he had a little bit of rough spots, but it wasn't like it's like oh he got beat on this rep. It's not like oh he allowed this sack. It was just like okay he's dealing. I mean, Panay fucking sized up Aaron Donald as a rookie. Like oh my god, dude.
Can you tell he's a Lions fan, ladies and gents? All
Yeah.
right, on to the second round. Let's, haven't talked enough about Panay. Uh, we've got 41st pick Levi Onwuzurike. This is the low point of the draft. He was a second round pick, a high second round pick at 41, and he only has one sack. He's a D end to D lineman, so he plays kind of all over the place as far as I know. And he was injured for the entire 2022 season. He can definitely turn it around. He can become better. He can do better. But as of now, I have a D on him.
All right, so had him at a C minus, and I'll go down on that. But the injury for the entire second year um, doesn't help. He only had 37% of snaps in his rookie year, and that's out of the second round. Um, that's not, it's not what you're looking for in the second round. I feel like you'd want little bit more rep and a lot more production out of that. He's just not been on the field enough to me, but I'll go down to a D flat with that.
I think also another thing to talk about with him is it's not like you're a DN taken in the second round just because he was there to a team that already has a solid D line. It's the Lions. They took Aiden Hutchinson a year after that, and they have always been needing D line help. And he just hasn't been able to make an impact, which is never a good look. So,
Yeah. All
uh,
right, so we'll go flat D for him.
flat D for him. And then we
All
move
right.
on to a slightly better defensive lineman in Aleem McNeil at pick 72. I liked him. He was a solid nose tackle. He started 17 games this past season. Nothing crazy stat wise, but he's a nose tackle, and that's just kind of what happens. He's just a big body to fill up some space, and he does that very well. He had 7 QB hits and 6 TFLs, and that's good stats from a space eater. He's 6'2", 330, and that's the definition of space eater.
He's been healthy. He's played in every game. He's been that like good little that interior space eater. He's gotten like 19 pressures in his career, and I think as the you know center of the D line, that's not really expected, but he's doing it, and so I think that's a big bump for him, especially given like okay, he only saw 30% of snaps year one, 70 year two, so he's gotten an increased role, probably due to Levi's absence, but he certainly carved the role out for himself. I gave him a B. Let's see where you're at.
I also gave him a B. I basically the same thing. Just he's done better than Levi, and well, it's not like 2 full letter grades better. He was picked around later, so it's a little bit more reasonable for him to be looked on more favorably when he's getting stats and was picked in the third round and he's getting starts and he's making an impact on that D line.
Yeah, I would say that he was considerably better than Levi. Plus, he wasn't injured a full year. Plus, he's like, he's actually getting better stats, having that those snap counts increase. Alrighty. So moving forward to round 3, pick 101, we have Ifeatu Melifonwu. I took that one for you, just in case you hadn't practiced up on that
Oh, I had.
pronunciation.
Man, Bengals Lions franchise.
Oh, okay.
I got it.
Oh, nice, nice. So safety drafted end the third round. I am not as high as him through the grading process as I was going into it. Going into it, I was like, I know his name. I've seen him on the field, you know, but looking at the stats and snap count, and he took a step back in year 2, and he's not really seeing the field all too often, and even less so with now we got uh, Chauncey Gardner Johnson, we have
Brian Branch coming in.
Tracy Walker come back from we got Brian Branch, we have Tracy Walker coming back from injury. It's really not gonna he's not gonna see any increase. So with just his few snap count, gonna be falling back, but I put him with a D plus, I maybe even lower.
I actually put him with a C minus just because it's hard to stat pick with DBs in general, safeties especially. Um, he only started one game, but you know, with the 10 games played and only 2 passes defended, only 14 total tackles, I I could see a D plus.
Alrighty then. Back on that.
Then we go to a very different player, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he was a very easy A plus. Again, not much needs to be said. He's an all-pro wide receiver taken on day 3. It's the same argument as Talanoa Hufanga for the
He's
49ers.
Yes, exactly. It's the value so much. So because as a lot of copium Lions fans will make an argument for Amon Ross top 10, Amon Ross top 5. He's not a wide receiver 1, so it's hard to like lump him in with a bunch of wide receiver 1s and say that he's better than them. But man, he doesn't drop shit. Like it feels like anytime he's targeted, he's gonna come down with it. Um, Week 18 this past season on Sunday Night Football was like the best example of that when he like catches it between his legs. He is literally probably reason for half of the success of the Lions for the past 2 years. Success in quotations because they still haven't, made playoffs or anything, but they certainly are moving in a good direction as an offense, and it's literally because of him and Sewell. And so I think matching them with grades of A plus is just kind of necessity at that point.
The the thing I like about him is that you could put him in the first round, and if he was drafted in the first round, if it was the top half of the first round, you'd be like, good value pick. That's right around where I'd expect him to go. If it was in the back half of the first round, you'd think that's a great value pick, and he was taken in the fourth. Um,
Especially when you look at what wide receivers are like we got Rashad Bateman in the end of round 1, like he's better than that. And just a fun little stat I managed to scrounge up. Out of in terms of the past 2 years, top 15 wide receivers in receptions. Amon-Ra St. Brown leads them in catch percentage. So that's not like, you're not comparing him to all these slot guys or all these your top 15 in terms of catches, and he leads them all. So that is just the big cherry on top of drafted in the 4th round. So
phenomenal player, phenomenal pick.
yes.
Moving on
I don't want to
once.
harp on it too much. I'm a fan, but I'm not gonna like make the whole video about it.
Moving on one pick
One
later.
pick later. Yep. We got the 4th round, pick 114. Or sorry, 113. Derek Barnes. Um, he he's kind of just a rotational linebacker for them. He's grown in his role, but now with Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone coming back, you don't expect that to stick around. I gave him a C plus just because of that value of linebackers there in the fourth round. But in terms of production, and he's just a rotational guy, can't give him much more as a plus above C flat.
Uh, so I had a B on him. Yeah, so basically, I just pointed out that he had taken snaps in 32 games over his first 2 seasons, so only missing one per year is pretty solid. He hasn't been super productive with the stats, but when you're a rotational linebacker and you're not in every single play, obviously you're not in to get every single stat. Linebackers are typically the highest in tackles, but the linebackers that start every single play are the ones that are the highest in tackles because linebackers are just typically involved in them. Uh, so I had a B on him. I can move down. You watched the Lions way more than I did, so I think you have a bit of a better handle on that.
I think I think we'll actually move up simply because I have consistency throughout the grading process. I just looked at a similar position kind of draft grading as I went one round back. I went right back to those Packers. I looked at the Slayton pick in the fifth round that we gave a C plus, and I think that I'll move him up. You know, it's a round earlier, but when you just look compare production and snaps, like snap counts, he's gotten more snaps. He's around earlier. I'll move up to just a B minus, just to give him that little extra knock over the Packers.
And then we go 3 whole rounds later. The Lions did not have a pick in the fifth. They did not have a pick in the sixth. But in the seventh, they took Jamar Jefferson, a running back that they added to the stacked running back room of DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. He was rotational with those two, and a rotational running back in a room with two solid running backs normally wouldn't put up crazy stats. And Jamar was not given a ton of opportunities, but he did average almost 5 yards a carry. He had 2 touchdowns. He only took 15 attempts. He's still with the team, and he is probably going to be in a very similar role, but with two different running backs with Monty and Jameer Gibbs. I had a B on him because of the value in the seventh round, where you're getting a running back who's going to give you some solid averages per carry, some touchdowns.
Yeah. Considering he was the third to last pick of the draft, I think I'm glad that you didn't give him like less than a B because I gave him a B simply because like okay, very end of the seventh, and he's getting reps. He's getting to see the ball every now and then because they have that third, they have the option in case of injury, and they had some injuries, so he just stepped up into that role, and having someone produce and get touchdowns when he's the third to last pick of the draft is something you can't really knock.
And then overall for the Lions, I don't actually think any of my grades changed. I think
If
Ife
they did, it
Atu
probably
Ife
wasn't
Atu
the
dropped down
most.
half a grade, and as did Derek Barnes. But my final grade still will stand. I had them at an A. They did very well with most of their picks. Uh, Onzarike and Melifonwu obviously not amazing picks, but every single other player has a place in that on that team. Sewell obviously the stud generational offensive tackle, and Amon-Ra obviously the wide receiver one there. Not necessarily a dominant like big body receiver one, but he is the best receiver in Detroit.
He's not an X wide receiver, but he's their wide receiver one. They got their two Pro Bowlers. They're two probably like perennial. We're gonna re-sign these guys until they want to stop playing football, or they're 35 players. And I went A minus just because I didn't want too much bias to be in that because I didn't want to be like, okay, well, I'm heavily weighing the A pluses, but A pluses should be heavily weighed. And when the rest of the class hasn't been so much like hard misses, it's just kind of been like, okay, depth player. Oh, here's a depth player. Oh, here's this guy who can come up whenever someone's injured. So hey, give that. I will move up and just be flat A because of the. I mean, you got two Pro Bowlers in the draft and insane value for each of them as well.
I think that the only reason I would move down to an A minus is just because the grades moved down on Zarike and Melifonwu, where they were just
Yeah,
or not on Zarike, sorry, Melifonwu and Derek Barnes, where I didn't have anything go up, so I could see an A minus. But again, A pluses are very hard to come by. You've got to be generational, and obviously you're probably going to see a fair few in the top 10 picks this year just because they were so good and there were so many
yeah.
generational talents taken this year. but any A plus is just an instant bump in the grade. I'm happy sticking at an A.
Yeah. All right. I mean, oh, I just looked at the top 10 list draftees. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson does not fit in.
Well,
Anyways.
okay, the Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, and J.C. Horn going to be a little bit out of the
Mhm.
out of the mold, but and Kyle, actually, this top 10 was hit or miss. Uh, we're going to move swiftly onward to the Vikings. In the first round, pick 23, they took Christian Darrisaw, yet another first round offensive tackle to pair up with, the infamous Alex Leatherwood and the famous Penei Sewell
uh,
and
there's
Rashawn Slater.
also, yeah, I was gonna say the Slater was in there.
I liked him.
Um,
Uh,
yeah,
the Vikings actually traded down and they landed a great offensive tackle. He had a 90.3 PFF grade this past season. Obviously, we're not going to base everything off of PFF grade, but to get a high PFF grade does mean something. He's missed games in both seasons due to injury. However,
mhm.
it's not the same injury over and over again, or like an arm injury and another arm injury. He had some concussions and he had an ankle issue and a groin injury, and that has kept him out of a total of 8 games over 2 seasons, which is not ideal, but it's also not telling that he's never going to come back and never going to play again.
He's definitely a good tackle. He's certainly not as bad as some taken before him. He's missed that time. It's lessened his grade for me, but also not by the most insane margins like J.C. Horn, where it was an A plus and we had to lower that significantly. Um, for him, I gave him a B because he's allowed the 10 sacks career wise. He's gotten 6 penalties, and he's played a hell of a lot of snaps for them despite injuries. Um, I really like him, and at the end of the first round, considering value of offensive tackle, I think he was a great pickup.
I had him at an A because of the
Oh,
positional value late in the first round with a whiff like Alex Leatherwood earlier than him. And even if he is missing a couple games, I'll let injury affect a grade if it's multiple of the same injury or if it's out for an entire season. But neither of his were like that. He just had some unfortunate mishaps where he got hurt and missed some games. And I still think he's going to be the cornerstone of that offensive line for whatever quarterback succeeds Kirk Cousins. I think that the positional value past pick 20 is insane. Normally, offensive tackles are taken in the top 15, and then guards, centers, everything else is taken past that. So I will fight hard for at least moving up from a B, if not all the way up to an A.
okay. So I think that this is a J.C. Horn situation. J.C. Horn, you had the A plus on him with the injury. I think we agreed on B plus on him. I have here a B plus for Darasol, and that was into account like okay, he's missed 9 games, and or I would say 10 games because one of them he played only special team snaps in and then barely saw the field. But we'll go with like the 9 games he's missed, and that's I understand the value of tackle, and it is later in the draft, so I think I'll move up to A minus, and I'll match you there, just because we had the J.C. Horn conversation, and J.C. dropped because of okay, well he was drafted at that position um, of the draft, and so I think it's fair to go A minus for Darasol.
I was going to say, if we're not going higher than JC Horn, then we've got a problem. I'm okay with an A minus. Uh, the difference between Darisaw and Horn, obviously, I think their play has been on an even grade, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, they're different positions, they're going to play differently, but I think that they've
Yeah,
been playing at the same level at their respective positions, and Horn's injuries are a little bit more concerning. And maybe having an elite corner is a little bit more valuable to a team than having an elite tackle, but I don't think it's that much more valuable. I think everybody's
I'd
always looking for
argue
elite
that
O line talent.
I'd argue that like J.C. Horn played so phenomenal when he was on the field, and then he missed so much time. And then the inverse is kind of here, where Darisaw hasn't missed that much time, but he hasn't played up to like a J.C. Horn incredible level as a tackle. He's just played like above average, like great tackle kind of status. But overall, injuries accounted, A minus I think is suitable here. Now I
The,
imagine we're not going to have as big as a disagreement on this next one.
oh God, no, Kellen Mond,
Not
what a
when you
wonderful
face
quarterback. Shout out A&M. Uh, Actually, I take it back. Do not shout out A&M. At 66, they took Kellen Mond. I've got him as a pretty easy F. He only played 3 snaps before he was waived. He was QB3 on the depth chart. He had 5 total yards on those 3 snaps, and he's just not a good quarterback.
There's 2 completions out of 3 snaps, so I mean, hey,
Are
five
you
yards.
are
Yeah,
you trying
great.
to tell me that you have him graded higher than an F?
Not at all.
Okay.
No,
See,
it's
that's what I
great
thought. That's what I
F.
thought.
Hey, hey, do we want to go F minus? He was taken a round before Ian Book. I think it's only fair.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'll match the F minus, the Ian Book grade.
Okay.
Actually, I think it's only fair if we keep the F minus to only Ian Book. Uh,
Yeah, I guess.
but we'll move on to round 3 a little bit further back in this round. Before we jump into this, they had 4 third-round picks. This is Chaz Surratt. He was a linebacker taken at pick 78. Pretty easy F as well. He didn't do anything for Minnesota. He logged snaps in 9 games his rookie year, but they were all special teams. He didn't accrue a single stat, and he lost the backup job to a rookie drafted in 2022 and was subsequently waived from the team.
I
Uh,
can't say I'm upset with this Vikings picks as a Lions fan because I had to grade Darisaw and I had to give him an A. But man, it's happy to follow that up with 2 Fs. Yeah, a special teamer in the 3rd round that doesn't stick around is not worth any. Uh, it's not worth that 3rd round.
uh, Moving on
F.
again. Yeah, F for Surratt. Call me DJ Khaled because oh boy, we got another one. We got Wyatt Davis at pick 86, another F. Only special team snaps, waived as a part of final roster cuts in his 2nd season, bounced around the Saints, Cardinals, and Giants, and is now residing on the Giants.
Um, just as a preface, real quick, I know he was wearing the Packers hat. I wore the Lions hat, and now the Vikings fans feel like they're under attack with 3 Fs right after each other. But come on, I mean, you gotta agree with us there. it's
Yeah,
it's not looking great for y'all. I think they should have just traded all of their 3rd round picks because clearly they can't hit nothing.
I think they could have become something. But we'll move on from Wyatt Davis. We won't spend too much time on the Fs, and we'll go to somebody who's a little bit better at least. Patrick Jones the second, a couple picks later at pick 90. He doesn't have a single start, but he played snaps in 25 games through 2 seasons. He had 4 sacks on only 306 snaps at outside linebacker, not at D line. Uh, and he's not bad for someone not starting every down. And he had an improvement year to year. He went from, I believe, no sacks rookie year to 4 his sophomore season, so he's figuring something out.
Yeah, he's a rotational guy. I did manage to find out that during those 2 years, they made a schematic change to a 3-4. That's why he was then labeled as an outside linebacker, and probably a good reason for an increase in production from it.
And you've got 5 on the line.
Yeah, and I went with a C here. I could go higher though. 3rd round pick. I could go up.
I had a C minus on him, so I'll move up to a C, and I think we'll be pretty set there. I don't think any higher. He didn't have any outlandish stats. He just had 4 sacks is good, but he needs to continue that production to move on up.
He needs the snap counts primarily, and then I think just based on his increase from year to year, that if he just gets some more snap counts, he'll be able to reflect it with more production for them.
Yeah. And remind me again, where did Zadarius Smith go? Did he stick with the Vikings this year? Or is he on the
No,
Ravens now?
he's also gone. I think he's on the Ravens.
Okay, so then that'll probably have Patrick Jones seeing an increased snap count, and we'll probably come back and look at this as a better pick than we did just now. But bright future
Yes.
ahead for the young lad, the best pick of the 3rd round for the Vikings. And then we're on to the 4th round, pick 119.
He's on the Browns, Smith is. I
Oh,
mean,
he is. Interesting. I think he started with the Ravens. I'll cut that out. I don't need to sound like an idiot. Uh, like I am here. 4th round, pick 119. We've got Kene and Nwangwu. Apologies for butchering that, as I'm sure I did. Running back for the Vikings. He hasn't made a huge impact as a running back, but I did find the kick return stats, and I've been referencing those for anybody who is a solid kick returner. He's got 3 touchdowns through 2 seasons returning kicks and is well above the league average for yards per return in both seasons. He does not return punts, so it's only kicks, but the average for the league is 22, and Nwangwu has 32 his first season and 26 his second season as those averages.
Yep. Average of 28.3. And he, I believe this past season was second team All Pro. So, yeah, you can say second team All Pro as a return man, but it's special teams are still part of the game. There's still value there. I gave him a B because of that, like the value. And it's a fourth round, so I'm gonna not give it so much. It's not like getting a solid kick returner in the seventh, but I gave him the B just to have that letter grade bump up out of his.
I had him at a B minus. I'll move up to a B. I agree. Kick returning is very important, especially when you're putting up touchdowns. Points are points. Doesn't
Yep.
matter when they're scored. So I'll agree with a B there. And we'll move on further down in the fourth round. Pick 125, Cameron Bynum. Uh, he's good. He's a good safety. He's no Hufanga, but solid player.
I found weird conflicting things on him, especially in regards to last season as a safety. That one source says he allows 22, another source says he allowed 29 in terms of receptions allowed. He's gotten interesting ups and downs, and I think that the allowing of 8 TDs, the allowing of up to almost 500 yards, it's it's not as cut and dry as like, oh, Hufanga, it's a lot. I gave him a C because you've got the pluses, you got the minuses, and I just kind of balances out with the position and the like draft position. I mean,
I was at a B plus on him. I really liked him. He had a lot of tackles. He had 81, 2 picks, 2 fumbles recovered, and 6 passes defended. And that's just last season. That's not combined stats from his first 2 years. That's one season. And with safeties, you're kind of gonna have some uh, bad stats
the
allowed.
big
You're
yeah, the big.
because
I think the TDs is just like the TDs plus the yards per completion. It's it gives me less in terms of like how we saw these stats, and it's like okay, I can justify it because he's managing to do this and the pass defenses and all that. And I think I'll agree with you that I can move it up now that you've like refreshed me on like pass defenses, interceptions, and all of that. Um, I think I would go up to a B. Match you.
um, I think that, just to reiterate a little bit, I think that he's doing very well, and the Vikings having a bad pass defense is hurting his general stats more than it's hurting his
Mhm.
specific stats. So you can look at advanced statistics and say, oh, he allowed all these touchdowns, but safeties are almost never the primary defender of a, like in coverage. They are normally in zones, normally not man to man against anybody, and if they are man to man, it's in the
Normally, like
flats against a
probably
running back or a
wrapping
tight
up
end.
someone.
So I'm gonna. I mean, obviously we've already agreed B is good for him, but
Yeah.
just to kind of explain it a little bit more, like why we aren't taking into account all the stats allowed, because the Vikings did have a pretty pitiful pass defense.
hmm
So for to have
I
an
I also want to just point out that snap count, the 100% of snaps, the over 1,000 snaps on defense in year two. He's coming out of the fourth round. I think that's reliable enough. So that's again another reason why I went up and agreed with that B because there's enough good to look forward to these coming seasons, and especially out of the fourth round. I think that's
we'll move on to another fourth round pick. They had a lot of these mid round picks. To Janarius Robinson, pick 134. He's a pretty easy F. He has not played a snap in the NFL. He's not on the Vikings anymore. I don't know if you have any additional insight into anything on him.
I know he was cut after just 1 year. I believe he was like a preseason cut prior to year two. Um, that's all. F.
Moving on into the fifth round, we got Amir Smith Marset at 157. He is another player who is no longer with Minnesota. and he only had 5 catches through 8 games. However, I could not give him an F because he did have 2 touchdowns. So
Yep.
he was able to put up some points, so I gave him a small bump, but that bump stopped at D.
Exactly. And that's all you can say about it is yeah, he's cut, but he that was some good stats to put on the field while he was with them. I also went D.
And then just to keep it consistent, I won't group these last two together, but round 5, pick 168, Zach Davidson, tight end, easy F, has not played a snap in the NFL, no longer on the Vikings. And
Yes, sir.
round 6, pick 199, Jalen Twyman, defensive end, another easy F. He has not played a single snap in the NFL and is no longer on the Vikings.
Now with a draft full of F F F F F F, um, I think that the highs here certainly take away from some of the Fs, but with those third round picks, the value of a third rounder compared to a sixth and a fifth missing, it's a lot bigger. Um, I had them prior to being convinced up on uh,
Darisaw.
Cameron Bynum
Oh.
and Darisol. I had them at a D minus, and with all the Fs, I would like to stay there, but considering the increasing grades, I'll go up to a D.
So I actually had him at a C. I said that they had way too many picks and way too many misses to give him a better grade, but I really like Darisaw. He's going to be a staple on that offensive line. I really like Bynum. He's going to be a staple in that pass defense that's really weak. So I don't see myself going any lower than a C
And a
minus because of
return
the
man.
Fs. Good return man.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, they had a lot of misses on day 2 and early day 3 with their 3 third round picks being misses. But the just sheer amount of picks that they had kind of leads me to be like, give them a little bit of slack. Not much, not much. I'm still sticking at like
Here,
probably a C minus, but
so here's my issue with that understanding is they had 11 draft picks. They have 4 currently rostered from this draft. And despite the talent level, like, if you look at the ones still rostered, you got an A minus, we got a B, and a C. Like, certainly that's not deserving of the D I was originally going to give them. I'll move that up to a C minus, but the misses are a big takeaway, especially the 3 third round guys,
yeah.
all being cut and contributing nothing past 1 year.
Yeah, and we can obviously look back in the future at especially Patrick Jones and then hopefully Cameron Bynum and maybe bump their grades in Wongwu as well if he decides to take snaps at running back because Dalvin Cook is no longer there and if you
Mm-hmm.
know something happens to Madison or what you know
I don't even know who the next up is. Yeah,
uh, but it is tough to look at Kellen Mond, Chaz Surratt, Wyatt Davis, Janarius Robinson, Zach Davidson, and Jalen Twyman. Some teams in this draft did not take 6 players and they had 6 F grades. But I still like a C minus because their hits were hits.
yeah, yeah. I'll match it with the C minus. Um, Certainly better than the Packers draft. So I think that that's a good reason to at least give them that little bit great bump up out of D.
And then we're gonna move on to the Bears, where I feel like we're gonna have some disagreements pretty early on. I will reiterate again something that I mentioned in the West video when I was talking about Trey Lance. I was very, very, very lenient on quarterbacks in this draft that have potential. So I know I was pretty harsh on Trey Lance, but guys like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones, I am fairly lenient on because their upside and their potential for the next coming seasons is very good. And it's tough to judge a quarterback off of 2 seasons because they have a little bit more of a learning curve as opposed to most other positions. We are going to disagree on Justin Fields, and I am okay having a discussion about it. I have him at an A because even though a more realistic current grade is like a B, B minus, near the end of last season, he looked like a top 10 QB in this league. And maybe that's exaggerating a little bit, but I am all in on the Justin Fields hype train going into this next season. I think he's the truth. I think he is going to be elite, especially when you add a dominant wide receiver one in DJ Moore rather than him throwing to Darnell Mooney, who's a great wide receiver too, but definitely not wide receiver one material. And then Chase Claypool, who has some attitude issues and doesn't like playing football.
All right, so I'm just gonna do a little stat dump here. Rookie season played in 12 games. In those 12 games, roughly 1,800 yards, 7 TDs, 10 interceptions, 420 rushing yards with 2 rushing TDs. Um, then Nagy left. Then year two, he goes ahead and has just a hardcore run the ball. Matt Eberflus really came in and said, "We're gonna just run the ball because clearly we can't pass." And he went ahead and got 2,200 passing yards, 17 passing TDs, 11 interceptions, but 1,100 rushing yards, 8 rushing TDs, and all of this said, also middle name Skyler. All of this, sorry, that just popped up in
Man, the
as
most
I looked at
random
the
shit.
PFR. Yeah. All of that considered, he he got an A from me, and I know you're expecting like okay disagreement, but I can't argue with the fact that at the end of last season it was going, and when you look at or his rushing stats, it's insane when you now consider the future prospects of wide receivers and better O line play. That's also huge. His rookie year, terrible O line, terrible wide receivers. Entering year two, really no adjustments were made, no changes. They got rid of Allen Robinson. Nothing got better per se. Um, they just changed coaches, and he had the learning time. He would have been a lot better if he could have just sat his rookie year. But um, Justin Fields to me is the second best quarterback in this draft, and I don't want to give him an A. I really don't. But it's so hard to like look at the future, and I'm sure Bears fans are elated that they got this guy, and they probably weren't after year one, but year two gives such a beacon of hope.
There's so much controversy around him, and there's so many people that are just so anti-rushing quarterbacks, anti-Justin Fields. But again, I don't watch many college football games. I definitely watched Justin Fields a couple times in college. He was not the scrambling quarterback that you see at the NFL level that he is now. That was not him in college. He has a
Because he
cannon.
had an O line. Yeah.
He has a cannon. He has an arm. He needs the time to prove it and like the time in the pocket, and he needs a dominant wide receiver one. And he's gotten both of those things now where they took an offensive tackle maybe a little early in Darnell Wright at pick 10, but they took a tackle, and that was something they needed. And he didn't exactly show the rushing threat in college that he has in the pro or that he has in the NFL. And seeing it, it's hard to think that he's going to be bad when you've seen what he can do given a good situation, and when you see that he came into the league with Matt Nagy as his head coach. And if he does pop off as much as I think he will going into year three, it is going to make Matt Nagy look awful, way worse than he already looks.
And while you were speaking, I was just okay. Let me peruse some more of these PFR stats that we have here. He was ninth in MVP voting this past season. Now that's a popularity contest, and he made a lot of highlight plays. So take that for what you will. But he also had 2 game-winning drives and a fourth quarter comeback last season. And he's gotten sacked 91 times throughout his 27 games in the league. That's horrendous. I don't want to give him an A. I really don't, because there's just not enough that you've seen that you can justify that with. So I will lower my A to an A minus, and that is the most I'm gonna budge for anyone that decides they want to. Like, I want to grade the first 2 years. The first 2 years are not A minus level. The
No.
future hopefully is.
So I was very lenient on the quarterbacks. I am okay calling the overall franchise tagged grade an A minus. My personal grade is not switching. So just because I'm agreeing on the A minus does not mean that I personally believe that he will be an A minus going forward. Because again, I did focus a lot more on the future than Elijah did, and we didn't talk much about our grades because we wanted to keep it kind of a surprise for each other when we go into these drafts. Where I didn't want to tell him exactly how I was grading because then that would make him be like, okay, so he's going to give this player this grade and like kind of lean this direction. But again, A minus on Justin Fields. I still really really like him. I am full in on the Fields hype train.
I will move up. I won't make you budge down to A minus. We'll stick with A
It's
simply
worked,
because
guys,
you
ladies and
you
gentlemen.
can't compare him to everyone else in this draft and be like, nah, he blows. Like, nah, you
Nah,
can't.
especially
Um,
man, especially with Zach Wilson picked second in the
mhm.
draft. Alrighty, and on to the next pick after that monologue, not monologue, duologue. I don't know if that's a word, but man, we talked about Justin Fields for a while. We're going to be moving on to Tevin Jenkins, another player I really like, drafted by the Bears, uh, where some injuries set him back in year one, and he was placed on IR in January this year. But the O line has been atrocious in Chicago, and he was a bright spot on it. He allowed only 2 sacks and only had 3 penalties called on him. Um, so I'm pretty high on him.
I might not match your praise for a Bears player as much as I just did again for the rest of this. He was drafted tackle, moved to the interior. He's only played 100% of snaps in 6 of the games he's played in, and he's had injuries, not at least from my memory, major ones, but ones that always kept him, kept you guessing on if he was going to be starting week to week. Um, his snap counts increased. He's on the projection upwards, but I didn't. Honestly, the biggest fucking mind fuck of this all is that he's only allowed 2 sacks, and holy, out of the 91 Justin Fields had in 2 seasons, only 4 of them have been from Tevin. So I gave him a C plus.
So I gave him a B plus. I am definitely okay moving down because I don't think he's on the same level as a Christian Darasaw, who we just gave an A minus to, and I don't think it's like half a grade up. Um,
Yeah,
I will say that his PFF grade last year when he did play was over 80. It was 80.7, and that's again we've seen some very low PFF grades. We haven't seen that many relatively high PFF grades. So he's a guard, so it's a little different than having a tackle. The positional value isn't exactly there, but any plus on a weak O line is always going to be nice to have. I am probably going to lean more of like a B minus maybe.
yeah. I'll move up, which is based on PFF and also contributions to run game, because I do know that he gets moving and no one gets in his way. So I'll move up to flat B for him.
Okay. And then we're going to go to an O lineman, another one who wasn't awful either. Larry Borom, that is. He played fewer snaps than Tevin Jenkins. He allowed more sacks and had more penalties called, but it was only 5 sacks. It was only 4 penalties. He was 36th out of 72 tackles that qualified for that ranking. And another thing, he plays tackle, not guard, like Tevin Jenkins. The more sacks allowed will happen. You're going to be playing the dominant edge rushers. He was also drafted in the 5th round to pick 151, as opposed to
Yes.
Jenkins in the 2nd round, pick 39. So over 100 picks
Yeah.
later.
I just to add on to that, he's gotten in just this past year. He started at left guard, he started at left tackle, and he started at right tackle, and he's stayed on the line for them. He's not moved into a backup role. He's coming out of the 5th round, and yet he's managed to stay as the starting alignment at all over the O line. So I think that he's also suffered injuries, but he still has some more snaps than Tevin. This honestly makes me rethink the moving up to B. I might move back down to B minus for Tevin and keep my Larry Borum grade at a B where I have it now.
I've also got Borom at a B. Oddly enough, I kind of think that they're at right around the same level because Borom now has moved down the
I
depth
think
chart.
just
He's
the 3 rounds difference in
I'm
drafting them
I'm
is
getting
a
to it.
plus.
I'm getting to it. So Borom his move down the depth chart. So he's not the like, okay, he's gonna start no matter what happens to the O line. He's behind Darnell Wright, and he did not edge out Braxton Jones for the starting left tackle job. Obviously, the depth charts can change. This isn't final or anything, but as of now, he is not a starting offensive lineman where Tevin Jenkins is, and I think that Jenkins is much better than Borom, and that's why I think that them having right around the same grade is fine, just because you're getting him 3 rounds later, sure, but he's not on the same level as a Tevin Jenkins.
I guess the value being higher than Tevin is there, but with new information that he's not a projected starter for them next year, I'll leave them both at B's then.
And so yeah, B's on them. Obviously, I think if the depth chart does change and if Borom beats out Braxton Jones for that starting job on the other side, because you said he had moved around a little bit, right?
Yeah.
If he does end up moving around to the other side of the line and beats out Braxton Jones, who I really don't know anything about, then the grade will obviously be a little bit higher on Borom, lower on Jenkins. But as of now, Tevin Jenkins is seemingly the guy on that O line that is the guy. Like he's the top dog on that O line, and Borom is
Yeah.
just a solid depth piece.
Moving forward, we have Khalil Herbert, round 6 draft here, pick 217, a running back, and he started only 3 games, thanks to David Montgomery being their starter. Um, he's been productive. He has a career yards per carry of 5, and he has 255 touches, which is receiving and rushing attempts combined. He's gotten 1,300 yards. And he's also gotten some return kicks in there, just slightly above average on kick return stats based on the 22 from earlier that you mentioned. And he doesn't project to be a starter anytime soon. Um, but he's been doing good from the role that he has. He's drafted out of the 6th round. I had a B for him.
I graded him. I was much more loose with giving out A's, so I actually gave him an A. I have a decent explanation for it. So he averaged 5.7 yards a carry last season, and that not only is an insane average, that's second league wide, and he had a good amount of touches, but it meant they could move on from David Montgomery and not have to pay him, which is another thing that isn't like obviously the running back position is very undervalued. You don't see running backs getting paid these huge contracts anymore as often, but anybody who frees up cap space is always going to be like a better pick. And if you're taking a guy in the 6th round who's going to be on a really cheap deal for 4 years, maybe he's not the starter, but it means you don't have to have that every down back. You can have a running back by committee with him and be perfectly fine with that. And I think that's what they're going to do with Deontay Foreman. I will be moving down from an A. I think that was very ambitious for him, especially with him not being the projected starter. But I'm going to argue for at least a B plus, if not an A minus.
I'll go B plus for the round value, and it's a running back, so you usually find them in 6 rounds and get some good value there. So I'll move up there.
I really like the fact that they don't have to pay David Montgomery because they took a good running back
Yeah,
in the 6th round, which now the Lions are stuck paying
I
David
know I'm paying him.
Montgomery.
All right, damn it, I knew it was coming. Moving on, we have
Ah,
also in the 6th round, pick 221, Daz Newsome, wide receiver. Not much to be said here. He's gotten 100 snaps rookie year, and he's bounced around various other teams as a practice squatter. F.
that's a pretty easy F. I think the Bears were like the second or third team I graded in this draft class because man, I wrote a paragraph about this man, and everybody else, every other team past this has just been, yeah, he's not on the team anymore. That's an F. This guy, it was even if you don't expect anything out of a 6th round pick, the Bears wide receiver room was one of the weakest in the league, and he totaled 2 catches. But yeah, it's an F. I do want to reiterate that the Bears wide receiver room was weak, and he couldn't find starting reps on it. So that's a it's a dig at a man that's already not on the roster anymore.
And next up in the 6th round, we just 7 picks later, we got Thomas Graham, a DB. He was waived after just 1 year. He got 50 snaps for them throughout 4 games. And then those snaps. He got targeted 12 times, had 6 receptions, and allowed a TD. It's a pretty easy F.
Again, this was one of the first teams I graded, so I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I gave him a D. That is an easy F after looking back on it. Um, he did have decent production in his debut game. He had 7 tackles and 3 passes broken up in one game, I believe. And those are some pretty solid stats, but he was thrown back on the practice squad and signed by the Browns in 2022, where he remains on their active roster. The only thing I think I can say for him that would lean not to be an F is that he wasn't actually cut. He was put on the practice squad and then taken by another
Picked
team.
up.
But if we're grading the pick for the team, obviously they didn't get anything additional out of him, so there's no real difference between cutting and him being signed off a practice squad. Into the 7th round, pick 250, we got Curious Tonga, another D lineman where he didn't really put up many stats. He was waived by the Bears in August of 2022, and he's bounced around the Falcons Vikings practice squads. Once again, I didn't really know what I was doing grading because, again, third team I did. So I had him at a C just because he put up stats and was a 7th rounder. Man, he's an F.
Sheesh.
It's pretty easy to say that he's an F now with how we've graded everybody else. Um,
Yes.
and that means that the Bears, interestingly enough, drafted how you would expect a draft to go, where they got some hits in the first few rounds, and then they just missed in late day three, which is very reasonable to have out of a team. Um, I initially had a B plus on them. They had good picks in the first and second rounds, and a lack of picks between the second and fifth round. Uh, they drafted fairly well. Their bad picks only came in late day three, and I think I'm still leaning B plus on that just because of the fact that their bad picks are only on the later end of the draft.
All right. So I'm gonna tell you what I thought prior to you increasing my opinion of both of the O linemen. Um, I said that they drafted 2 injury-prone O linemen. They have what could be their QB of the future, what could also be a pick that is like, the next the Bears fans quarterback that they love but never actually panned out. Um, the late misses is again just like, oh, day three that can kind of just be written off, and then they also have a day three good pickup of Khalil Herbert. So I originally gave them a B, but with the increase of the grades to both O linemen, I'll go B plus.
And obviously, this is probably one of the toughest grades because it's almost all projection. Because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like most players on this team, aside from Tevin Jenkins, we haven't seen their full potential. And even Tevin, we've seen him injured both years. So we haven't seen a full good year out of any of these players drafted, which is sometimes the case with teams after 2 years, sometimes not. Sometimes you see everything you need to within 2 years. And so I think that this is one of the very few draft classes that we can look back and be like, wow, we graded them perfectly, and it was, we projected into the future really well, and this is exactly how it panned out. We can also come back and be like, look, Justin Fields took a hit and tore his ACL in year three. Please don't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we can look back and say, look, Justin Fields got hurt. Tevin and Larry Borom couldn't shake the injury bug. Khalil Herbert never made it past RB2, and all these grades turn into C's at the high end. So it's a very tough draft to grade. But as of
I
right
think
now, projecting forward,
specifically, yeah, specifically projecting forward, I don't think we've really done it for any team as heavily as we did the Bears. So in terms of that, it's take the B plus with like a grain of salt because a lot of it is like projection. Because even if we look at the Lions and we gave them an A, and that's just 2 grades above a B plus, but the B plus is really just like where can they go? Because if you're being realistic and you're just grading the first 2 seasons as is, and you're looking at these guys, I think that this is probably like a C plus because underproducing quarterback, injury prone no lineman, backup running back isn't too much to walk away from, but it's just more so how those pieces have set them up for the future. You got the pieces at the O line, you have a running back that meant that you didn't have to pay your old running back, and you have a quarterback that could end up being your franchise guy. So all of that considered, it's a B plus.
I think the only knock you can have on Fields at this point in his career is that he wasn't Micah Parsons, who was picked one pick later. And maybe, you could say, oh, Rashawn Slater as well, but you know,
But
they've built the O
at
line
the
now.
same yeah, at the same time, he's pick 11, and you had like what was it, 3 or 4? No, Mac went after. So you had the three like top three picks, all be quarterbacks. And is he better than any of them? Yes.
Yes.
So that's definitely a big plus to his game.
And especially when the Bears, maybe not as like a, you know, as a full organization, maybe they didn't need quarterback there, but as a team that the fans are watching and just seeing this quarterback carousel just suck and suck and suck, you need somebody with potential. And Fields did not show that potential year one under Matt Nagy, but as soon as he got a competent head coach that worked with him for a little while, you could see him start to be like, okay, maybe earlier on in the season you were like, man, this guy's still just but when they started to mesh together, they started to figure things out. He started to get better, and I truly believe that DJ Moore to Chicago is going to be like the Diggs to Buffalo, like a
Yeah.
player who's very good on the team that drafted him, but that just you know isn't his interest didn't align with the team that drafted him, and yeah,
So when we go and we zoom out of each of these individual teams and we look at this as a division, we have two really good drafts. Again, give or take with a little bit of projection in there. Then we have two ones that are kind of lower ranked there. And real quick, we have the D for the Packers grade. Their highlights being, Eric Stokes at the end of the first round. Uh, just some kind of depth guys that are sprinkled in there throughout all of the rounds that haven't managed to do much. And their main knocks are, oh, you should have picked this guy instead because this guy's on the board and you've got a similar position, same guy that are like Pro Bowlers if you look at them. So that's their biggest knocks. And following that up, we got the Lions, who obviously the two, you know, stud pickups of this draft, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, both managed to just make the biggest impact that immediately, to that team immediately. And, again, sprinkled throughout that is, okay, we got some good depth pieces in the seventh round. We got Derek Barnes in the fourth. Uh, but then also a little bit of disappointment in there with Ifiatu and then Levi Onwuzurike. And it's not the biggest disappointment, and that's why I think final grade is still an A because you got the two studs. And do you want to take it over for the Vikings here?
yeah. So then we're moving on to the Vikings, where they started off the draft real hot. Christian Darrisaw, we really liked him, gave him an A minus. He looks to be the staple of their offensive line, the cornerstone of that O line for the future. Then they had four third round picks and completely whiffed on three of them and had a depth piece that has some upside potential with Patrick Jones after that. Then further down the board, they had some okay picks, a running back that's mid, a safety that's pretty good, and then just another group of guys that didn't pan out at all. And while they did have good and bad players, they had way more bad players than good, and a lot of those guys came at the cost of some earlier day two picks, and so we stuck with a C minus on them. And then the Bears, we hadn't done much projecting into the future with the other teams that we had graded, but man, did we start here with maybe a little bit overgrading what they have done so far, but they also haven't. I think the argument for looking forward is they haven't done much so far. Like they haven't been terrible and they haven't been in the best situation. So I think projecting is okay when you kind of look forward and you're like, okay, this team is on the rise. Not necessarily all through the draft, but they drafted a new offensive tackle. They got a wide receiver one for their first round quarterback from a couple years ago, and everything is just kind of looking to fall into place for them. And if they, you know, underperform this season, maybe we look back at this draft and we're a lot more critical of Fields and we drop his grade a couple full letters, and maybe we see Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom not have full seasons. They're still injured and we drop their grades. But overall, right now, we've got them at a B plus because of projecting where their actual production maybe is closer to that of a C or a C minus, just because of the heavy projections on Justin Fields. Uh, but overall, this was a very fun division to grade. The highlights in each draft class, except for the Packers, kind of, their highlight was a C plus at Tadarius Slayton, and other than that,
That's more so of a value. Their main like upside would be Stokes, just because first round guy, the
yeah,
time on the field that he's going to see.
yeah. Uh, but overall, very, very fun division to grade and some very, very fun teams to look forward for the future. The NFC is a weak conference. Uh, Not necessarily like weak, but much weaker than the AFC. I think there's a lot more competition in the AFC. So to have some of these teams drafting players that are putting them on the map to be competitors is a little bit easier to do in the NFC. So it's cool to see. But yeah, this has been the NFC North 2021 draft grade recap. Uh, Let us know if you disagree with any of our takes. Talk to us about Justin Fields in the comments. Clearly, we love talking about him.
Please talk to us about Justin Fields in the comments.
Join the Discord. Join the Discord. It's going to be linked down in the description. That's going to be the easiest way to get in touch with us and you know have your discussions heard. The YouTube comments will be heard, but it's going to be a little bit more of a direct notification through that Discord. So definitely join up on that. Throw us some follows on Twitter, the main franchise tagged account at tagged franchise. I am FTP Anderson on Twitter, and
I'm FTP Jaw, JH.
thank you all for watching.
Deuces.